Hey everyone, welcome to Joy Meets World. I am your host, Joy Yugi, and on this podcast, I'm talking about my travels around the country visiting our national parks with my dog Quincy. Hope you enjoyed that little clap I did accidentally right there. Hopefully, it wasn't too loud in your ears. Today, I'm talking about my visit to Arches National Park and Canyonlands National Park, which are in southeastern Utah and are right next to each other. So I left off in western Utah in Cedar City, visiting Zion and Great Basin and Bryce Canyon National Park, which were right by there. And then from Cedar City, I drove across the state of Utah to Grand Junction, Colorado. So right across the border into Colorado is this little town called Grand Junction. It's one of the bigger towns I've stayed in lately. It's defined as a city. It was a 5 hour drive, about 337 miles, but a pretty straight shot across the state, not too busy of a road. So for being a long drive, it was a pretty easy drive. Grand Junction, Colorado is about an hour and a half, 2 hours from Arches and Canyonlands. The closest city to those parks is called Moab. You've probably heard of it. And it stays very, very busy throughout the year. Arches is one of the most popular national parks. And so Moab was just booked up, and there was no room in the inn for me, as they say. So I stayed a little while away in Colorado. Canyonlands National Park was started or became a national park in 1964, and the at the entrance of the park is one of the four zones or four areas that are a part of that park, called Island in the Sky. And the person who kind of discovered the area of Canyonlands and Arches named it that because it's so high up from everything else. I it has a great view. It's a canyon, so you look down and you see this windy road and a river and the mountains, the LaSalle Mountains, on the horizon. But I think I'm getting afraid of heights. I think I can't really deal with heights too much anymore as far as cliffs and mountains. I did not feel comfortable getting near the edge, got a tiny bit of vertigo. And then there were tons of families there, and there's no fencing along the edge of the view for Island in the Sky. It's just a sheer cliff face, and they just expect you, to use your best judgment and not get too close and be careful. But there was this family with these two, maybe middle school age kids, and they went right to the edge and were looking over, and the kids were like joking around about pushing each other. And I I'm not judging that because like it's just a typical kid thing to do, but it actually made me nauseous. Like I had to look away. It made me so nervous that I was nauseous. I had to look away, and then finally I had to walk away because I was so anxious about people being near the edge, and I just couldn't take it anymore. Um, the park, Canyonlands National Park, is 527 square miles. Again, it's made of four districts. So, Island in the Sky, the Needles, which is what it sounds like. It's these pinnacles of rock. And then the Maze, which is also what it sounds like. It is this crazy maze of slot canyons, but it's for like miles, hundreds of miles. It's insane. And then the Rivers District. So Canyonlands is home to the confluence of the Colorado River and the Green River. So essentially where they come together, which is really neat. I got to see that in person, and they were two different colors. So the Green River was a more greenish hue, and the Colorado River was a more brown hue, and you could see exactly where they came together. Like the different colored waters coming together, which was really cool. Something cool about Canyonlands is that it was the hideout for Butch Cassidy and his gang when they would, rob a bank or do a heist. They would lay low for a while afterwards, and they came to Canyonlands, to the Maze District, and that's where their hideout was. That's where they would hide for a couple months before getting back at it. So I thought that was really cool. Canyonlands is parts of it are so remote. So that Maze District, the Needles District, so remote. The Needles is a little bit more accessible. It's 2 hours from that visitor center, Island in the Sky Visitor Center, which is still quite a trek just to get to like a campground, and then you still have to hike. The maze, it's 6 hours from the visitor center by dirt road, so you have to have an off-road vehicle to use it, and it's 6 hours just to get to a spot where you can park and then go hike or camp or whatever. So not a lot of people get out there because it's such a long trek, and also there's nothing out there. There's like, when we're talking about campground, it's just like a dirt plot. There's nothing. There's nothing to sustain life. Other things in Canyonlands Park is Horseshoe Canyon. So what's special about Horseshoe Canyon is there are petroglyphs from Native Americans there. I did not get to see Horseshoe Canyon because it was such a long drive and I had limited time. Dead Horse State Park abuts Canyonlands National Park. And I learned that essentially it is a lot of the same views that you can see from Island in the Sky. So it's almost like you pass the entrance for Dead Horse State Park, and then 5 miles later, you're at Canyonlands National Park. And apparently, Canyonlands gets super busy too. It was not the day that I went, which was a weekday. But there were signs out, at the entrance. There was a sign about a mile back that said, if you're stopped here, it's going to be an hour till you can get into the park. And if you're stopped here, it'll be half an hour till you can get into the park. So it seems like they get overflow and they get really, really busy. So if you go and that happens to you, just go to Dead Horse State Park because you're going to see a lot of the same views that you would from Island in the Sky. There are actually arches in Canyonlands National Park too. They're just all kind of undiscovered and unnamed. So I got to see a few of those too. And the arches, so just to transition over to Arches National Park, so the reason this area of the world gets arches in its canyons versus, why other canyons don't get this is the type of sandstone it is. So this sandstone, the way that it kind of wears down and deteriorates is that, snow and ice will kind of land on it, freeze, melt, expand it, and it chips away at this sandstone, and eventually the canyon forms these fins. And a fin is a geologic feature, but it looks exactly what it sounds like. It's like these just almost shark-looking giant fins coming out of the ground, and tons of them next to each other. So they form these fins, which are thin arch-like structures, and they're solid, but then the whole process keeps happening where the snow and ice chip it away, and it just forms a hole in the fin, and that's how you get the arches. So it's just the type of sandstone that's found in this part of the world, and the type of weather that they get that just makes it an ideal condition to form arches. Arches National Park became a national park, in 1929. It's 120 square miles, so smaller than Canyonlands National Park. Again, it's right next to Canyonlands, probably about 7 miles down the road from the entrance to Canyonlands. What's important to know about Arches National Park is because it's so popular, like any time of the year, any time of the day, that they have instituted a timed reservation system. So you have to log on and reserve an hour of the day when you enter the park. So, for example, I reserved a 1 to 2 p.m. time slot, and that means I got in line to get into the park at 1 p.m. The line was so long and this was at 1 p.m. It took me half an hour to reach the entrance station, showed them my permit, showed them my parks pass, and then I could get in. A lot of people didn't know that. They were turning a lot of people away at the door, so to speak. They didn't know there was a timed reservation system. There are some other parks that do that. I know Rocky Mountain National Park is instituting that. Zion National Park, they didn't have an entrance permit, but you did have to reserve a space for certain hikes. So I would just say before you go to any park, look at recreation.gov, search the park, see if there are any reservations or permits that you need to either get in or to do a hike, because that's going to save you a lot of heartache. If you want to go, you don't have a reservation, but you're in the area, or you need to go on a certain date just because of the dates that you'll be there, you don't need a reservation. I believe it's before 9 a.m. or after 5 p.m. So you can technically go and see the sunrise and or sunset and, kind of stay in the park. So in case of emergency, you can always do that. There's a couple of things to see at Arches. I mean, there's a lot to see at Arches. Devil's Garden is all the way at the end, and that's a pretty hard, steep hike that takes a while. I think it's 10 to 14 miles, so I didn't have time to do that one. I went up to Sand Dune Arch, which you get to. It's a really short hike from the parking lot, but you go in between a slot canyon, and it's this little arch up in that canyon. And then there's a similar hike right there to Broken Arch, which is a much, much bigger arch, and it's really cool to walk through it and then see the view out over the valley. So that was really cool. I saw Balanced Rock, which is actually, there's a ton of features in the park that look just like Balanced Rock. It's essentially this rock pinnacle and then this like fat boulder balanced on top of it. And it's actually all one rock. It's just the way it's worn down. But it looks like just this big boulder is balanced on this pinnacle. Again, I don't know why they picked that one to be the feature that you stop and see and take a picture of, because there were a lot of those types of structures around the park. I really love the windows section, and it's called that because there's a bunch, I shouldn't say a bunch, there's 3 or 4 huge arches right next to each other in the windows section. There's North Arch, South Arch, and then the Double Arch is my favorite because, yeah, it's a double arch. Not much more to say there, but it looks really, really cool. You can check out my reel on my Instagram to see a picture of that. It was probably my favorite thing. There's also another area called the Fiery Furnace, and it's a bunch of those fins that I talked about for like miles, just all of these fins in the ground. It looks like if you took like a flat piece of clay and then a sharp knife and then just like chopped at the clay, and it would leave these like line marks in it. That's what it looked like. And it's called the Fiery Furnace because the way the sun hits it in the evening, it lights up like it's on fire. I did not see that, but that's where it gets its name. I don't think I would have realized how amazing it looked and how it looked like that kind of chopped feature unless I had seen it from the air. And that's what I did. So because Canyonlands and Arches were so big and I had such limited time and I couldn't see all of it, I decided to do a helicopter tour, an hour helicopter tour. It left from a little airport, Canyonlands Airport, which is near the parks. And we left about 9:30, 10 o'clock. They promoted it as a helicopter tour, but it was actually a 6-seater little Cessna type plane that we took off in. And we got to see all of Canyonlands, all of its different districts from the air, the confluence of the rivers, all of the unnamed arches in Canyonlands, the Henry Mountains, the LaSalle Mountains, the LaSalle Valley. You just got to see everything. And then Arches, all the parts that I didn't get to hike, I got to see as well. And you got to see everything from the air. And so that was an unforgettable experience. I would 100% recommend doing it, especially for these parks because, most of us have limited time when we're coming to these parks, don't have time to drive it all, hike it all. And also, it's so hard to really understand what these structures look like when you're just seeing them, up close and in front of you. Whereas from the sky, you get more of a 3D picture of them and you can really understand, just the vastness and the complexity of what makes them up. I will say, yes, I got nauseous the last 30 minutes of the ride. The turbulence was not bad. It was not windy that day, but I think just in a small plane like that, you end up moving a lot more than you would in a normal plane, because typical plane rides, I don't mind at all. I didn't get sick enough to throw up, but my stomach definitely did not feel good. So I would just say take a Dramamine before you get on, or if you're really motion sick, maybe not. Maybe it's not the best idea for you. One thing that's really interesting that I thought about Arches National Park is the arches do fall. So in 2008, one of the arches called Wall Arch fell during the night. Campers said it sounded like thunder. So these arches are not going to be around forever. New ones will definitely form. They form really slowly. And the existing ones will definitely fall. They'll fall it'll take them a long time, but they will fall just because at the lowest point of their arch, that's constantly wearing thin. And so that they can fall. And the national park is actually keeping an eye on one of the arches because they've seen a crack in it expand. And so they're basically watching it every day to make sure they don't need to get people away from it and stop people from going under it in case that falls. So little wild fact there, but I went in mid-April to these parks. It was a great time to go. Definitely colder on top of, when you get up to Island in the Sky and up into Arches National Park because you're so high up. It was breezy, and I would say it felt like maybe 55 degrees, but it was sunny. So, a sweatshirt and pants kind of hiking weather. But honestly, you wouldn't really want anything else. I will say down in the valley, in the visitor center, when you're between the canyon walls, oh my gosh, it was so hot. It felt like it was 80 degrees, no breeze. You were just baking. So it's just really interesting, the different temperatures between the elevations. So just something to note. A really fun time in Arches and Canyonlands. I hope you guys get to go. Until next time, I wish you happy travels wherever life is taking you.